much listened very carefully to my colleague speaker here, the questioner here, when he mentioned the connection, because I mean, I was born in the Caribbean, and I also worked in the sugar industry, like you said, when the factories had to work around the clock to produce. And also I worked in cotton mills over here, and also at that time, even in the late 50s, it wasn't easy. I mean, looking at the labourers in the work in the cotton mill that was connected to the trade that the cotton that was coming from American places, it was pretty tough work.
I've been doing some interviews recently with some of the Asian community in Rochester who came over in the 70s to work in the cotton industry primarily. Well, they were pretty much, that's what they came over for. They were obviously, people went over to Pakistan and India to recruit. And they were given the worst jobs, obviously, when they came over. And jobs that were pretty appalling. And this is in the 70s, you know. This is, I'm not talking about 100 years ago. I'm talking about the 1970s. Underneath the machinery, cleaning, you know, all dust out, which led to all kinds of lung diseases and everything. And lots of people died as a result of this. So you can see that this legacy of abuse in terms of certain industries that relied on manual labour to such an extent is carried on right through. And although we talk about the ending of slavery, obviously, I'm not saying in any way these people were slaves, but just talking about the working conditions that people had to work in. It's really only in recent years that things have started to change, you know.
I've got Bajan relatives who've told me that there were Scots and Irish indentured labourers in Barbados that they used to call redlegs for obvious reasons, and I wondered if anybody could tell me a bit more about that.
Anyone else know about the Bajan redlegs? I'm not an expert on the Bajan redlegs, but yeah, but I'll just say my bit, which and then you can come in and tell the real story. There will be different generations of redlegs, but the first ones were in the 1650s, in the wake of the English Civil War, and some of them were sent over as virtual slaves. The prisoners of war, the Catholics in particular, were sent over as virtual slaves and were put on plantations, some of the early sugar plantations in Barbados. So they were war captives, really, and they were taken over there. There were later Scots, Irish and Irish as well, but that first group, it was basically transportation or death, and those who were killed were those who they felt had rebelled most, and those who were conscripts they sent out to Barbados. And they were working on the plantations at first as the workers, but eventually most of them actually became supervisors of one kind or another. So. Am I right?
That's absolutely right. Also, the question here. Also, the phrase "red leg" was nothing to do with that. It was just because there were different. I remember at the particular area that you're speaking about, the art in Barbados at that particular time. Said when the youth, there were a set area that were what we call white people.
St Andrews.
St Andrews, that's what, yes. But that was nothing to do with derogatory remarks. It was just because they're different, with a different colour to us, and we didn't understand it.
Yeah, in the sun.
I keep forgetting your... Yeah, like I said, the majority of them move on to supervisory status, you know, so that was it.
And then that shows the racial... Sorry. This really shows the racialisation of slavery, doesn't it? Because actually these people were enemies of the British state. I mean, the Africans who were brought in weren't enemies of the British state at all, but immediately, you know, because of the racialisation of slavery, they were the ones who got the supervisory positions, you know. And it just shows that slavery became racialised very quickly. And this is in the very first few years of plantation slavery in Barbados, because Barbados was only British from what, 1635 or something. So it's very early. It's very early.